Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where some very good movie news for Benicio Del Toro reminded me of some acting advice that Jack Nicholson once gave to Terry Garr. Bear with me, you'll see the point of this story in just a moment. So anyway, Terry Garr obviously is not of the caliber of Jack Nicholson, but back in the day when she was an up-and-coming actress, their paths crossed. Although I believe that Jack Nicholson's path is crossed with a number of ingenues throughout his lifetime. But anyway, Terry Garr decided to complain about the lack of quality roles that were being made available to her as an actress. But Jack Nicholson was not sympathetic, and he said, "Terry, not only are you killing the mood here," no, I'm just kidding. He said, "Terry, an actor acts." And what he meant by that is, look, you just have to keep yourself out there and be somebody who is currently working. And you just take the best role that is made available to you at the time, which would explain some of Jack Nicholson's work as well. Although he's certainly never been as guilty as one would say Robert De Niro, right? Who maybe took that advice a little bit too much to heart. But anyway, Benicio Del Toro is someone who has had to just keep making sure that he works. He had a high point there. I mean, he's an Academy Award winner for Traffic, for Pete's sake, but he's had a very hard time as of late getting work. You know, I think that he starred in The Wolfman. We'll be talking about that in just a moment, actually. And that was like his big shot to headline a movie. And it did not work out so well. So he, of course, is kind of faded into the background. But he just kept taking jobs. And he got a supporting role in Sicario, the Denis Villeneuve movie, which starred Emily Blunt. But that Benicio Del Toro boy, he stole the movie away from her. And everybody who saw Sicario was like, it's okay, except for that great sequence when they leave the safety of the American base to go into Juarez, Mexico. But wow, Benicio Del Toro is so good in that movie. In fact, they're thinking of making a sequel that just totally leaves behind everybody else in the movie and just focuses on Benicio Del Toro's character, and they're going to call it Soldado. But he got an even better gig out of it, because now he is in talks to star in Shane Black's Predator Reboot. So see how that worked out? He just kept working, found himself in like a semi-artistic action movie, right? So it was artistic and artsy enough that it wanted Benicio Del Toro, but it was genre-y enough that someone like Shane Black could see it and go, you know what? I could see him in Predator. It's a great idea. And also to have a Puerto Rican actor in a movie that takes place in South America, if they're going to, stick to the original Predator. Well, it's a reboot, but if they're going to, have some elements to it, that's, I think, very authentic. And I can see audiences really getting behind that. In, the Fast and Furious day and age, where the Latino market is very strong at the box office. Again, look at the Fast and Furious movies. In fact, when The Wolfman came out, I was doing audience reviews, and I was really impressed that a number of people who came out to see that movie came out just because, at least opening day, that they were just so pleased that a Puerto Rican actor was playing the Wolfman. So there was a lot of support for him in that. Not enough to get the movie to particularly do well at the box office, but still, it was encouraging. And I think that Shane Black's dialogue, if you haven't seen The Nice Guys, a lot of people, I believe, are streaming, and it's very high up on the iTunes charts. It's a good movie. It's not like a must-see in a theater kind of movie like a Predator reboot would be, but if you see the kind of dialogue that Shane Black writes, that's why he and Robert Downey Jr. are such a good team, if you've also seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang or Iron Man 3. And I think that Benicio Del Toro could do quite a good job with that dialogue as well. So I think this is a fantastic team up. It won't just be Benicio Del Toro. It's going to be an ensemble picture, because they need a lot of people who the Predator is going to kill, right? It's like, we need a lot of people to die. But Benicio Del Toro would be the leader. So I think that's going to be great. Like, for instance, I just recently watched Aliens again, because, it's like kind of a dead time right now, and so I'm rewatching some old movies because it's fun. I watched Skyfall, actually. That's what started it. I rewatched Skyfall, and I was like, that was better than I remember it. So I'm rewatching a bunch of films, and I thought that Aliens, for instance, was very Suicide Squad, and that was like a genuine Suicide Squad. And I think the Predator would be a genuine Suicide Squad. I think Shane Black actually would be a wonderful choice, and since he has a good relationship with Warner Brothers these days, maybe I would approach him for Suicide Squad too. I think he'd actually be spectacular, a spectacular match with that material. So I think this is going to be very exciting, and I think that they could not have come up with a better idea of matching an actor to not only the director, writer talent, but the material as well. So I'm curious if you think this is as good an idea as I do. And what do you think of Benicio Del Toro not giving up and now it looks like he might be back on top, baby. I know he's the collector in Guardians of the Galaxy, but does not, so far, it's not a particularly fantastic. It's like Glenn Close being the head of the Nova Corps. Well, whatever. It's more just so that they can tack the name on the movie. But this is very exciting. But maybe he wouldn't have gotten this. Maybe, who knows what led to him being offered the Predator. I'm sure Sicario was the main thing, but maybe him being the collector in the MCU helped him get Sicario. You never know. So I think it's great. So good for him. And Jack Nicholson, that was some good advice. All right, so that's the first story of the day. And the second story of the day, look who else is getting some work off of their recent success. The Sausage Party, of course, very successful movie, and Conrad Vernon was the one of the two directors that was not blamed for making people work overtime and not paying them. So he got into a movie deal, where the other guy, I didn't bring his name up, I think it's like Greg something, his career might be over. But Conrad Vernon, his career is very much alive. So Sausage Party, as we talked about yesterday on Movie Math, almost at 100 million domestic. That's amazing. So he's been offered a job that was previously offered to Hot Tub Time Machine's Steve Pink, who is now out of there, to do a live-action reboot of Troma's The Toxic Avenger, which is basically the story of a teenager who turns into a pile of poo, who becomes a crime fighter and has a sex scene with a hot blonde. That sounds like Sausage Party material to me. I hope it has the same intelligent commentary that was married to Sausage Party, which I think made it a little stand apart from the other, gross out fests that like Hot Tub Time Machine. Hot Tub Time Machine 2 was so offensive and so homophobic and just so bad. It was just like, I can't believe that a studio released it. It was really horrible. And so I'm glad that they didn't hire Steve Pink to do anything. It's horrible. But Conrad Vernon, I would be behind this as well. And I think that, and also they have one of the writers from Archer. The coverage of this was very misleading. They're like, the Archer guy, Mike Arnold. And I was like, oh, did he create Archer? And let me go double check. I've never heard this man's name before. I always, whenever I hear Archer, I'm like, John H. Benjamin, and that's all I care about. But Mike Arnold's just one of the writers. He's co-written 3 episodes or something. So that's a little bit of reach. But if they can get any Archer humor in there, that would be pretty impressive. So, I mean, this sounds pretty like raunchy to me, but I think that if they can get the Seth Rogen kind of commentary in there that made Sausage Party stand out, I think this could very much work, actually. And it's interesting to see Troma become, more mainstream. James Gunn, of course, comes from a Troma background and has injected, I think, some of those qualities into Guardians of the Galaxy, and people like that, like some of the things that maybe someone like myself doesn't like about Guardians of the Galaxy. I can see the Troma fingerprints all over it, but of course that movie did extremely well. I'm talking about, just as an example, because, someone might be like, well, what's your example, Grace? Because, a lot of us disagree on Guardians of the Galaxy. But I didn't even think of this. This came from another female journalist, and I was like, good point, lady. But, in the beginning of the movie, when Star-Lord doesn't even realize there's a woman that he left, like a girl he had a one-night stand with on his ship, and he's like, oh, my God, I forgot you were on here. And everyone's like, hilarious. Well, this woman said, if he'd left a guy on the ship or somebody else, he would be very worried that he would steal the ship or something. But the thing is that he can leave this woman on the ship unattended and forget about her because he knows that she poses absolutely no threat. She's like literally a blow-up doll. And that kind of stuff obviously bothers me as a fellow woman. Nobody likes to be thought of as an object rather than a person. So, but that's very Troma-esque, right? So I could see if they could maybe kind of just evolve it enough, I think that this could do incredibly well, or at least well enough to offset the small budget that they would have for something like, who would spend a lot of money on the Toxic Avenger? Not a smart producer, that's who. All right, speaking of producers, what a perfect segue, and I even did it by accident. Amy Pascal still lives. This is the head of Sony Pictures, who was, of course, let go while she had to quit because of the Sony leaks. The leaks were not only were embarrassing because they leaked all the inner workings of Sony Pictures, but it was shown that she was not only kind of not cool and a little bit racist towards President Obama and stuff like that, but also she was maybe not conducting business in the best way possible for the company, right? Like getting into fights with people, letting some pictures go that she shouldn't have. It didn't make her look good. But Amy Pascal, as I said, still lives and has started a production company called Pascal Pictures. We recently talked about how people become producers and sometimes they leave studios and start their own production shingle. And that's exactly what Amy Pascal has done. And she has a deal with, what do you know, Sony. So I'm glad she used her name, although this is one instance where maybe she wouldn't want to use her name because I think think a lot of people, well, I'm curious to see how many people remember. Will they see Pascal pictures and be like, Amy Pascal, the Ghostbusters lady? Or they just be like, yeah, whatever, it's the pre-rolls. But most of the times when women have companies, they don't put their names on it. They're like Flower Films or Rainbow. And that always kind of bothers me a little bit because male producers usually put their names on it. And she's a protege, though, of Scott Rudin. Actually, that's how she got her start. She was his assistant when he was the head of Fox. And then when he left, he gave her his job. And so she ended up going to Sony eventually. But they're very close. And actually, the Obama emails were between her and Scott Rudin. He got in a little bit of trouble for that as well. But anyway, so I think maybe she named it Pascal Pictures because his is Scott Rudin Pictures, etc. But anyway, she's working on some major films that you're probably going to be watching. So not only is Pascal Pictures credited on Ghostbusters, but it's also credited on Spider-Man Homecoming and also the Charlie's Angels reboot. So that's, it's like, Amy Pascal, have you not learned your lesson? But I mean, Charlie's Angels started out as an all-female team, but if I were her, I would maybe want to stay away from stuff like that. But she has a new film that an upcoming book that she just purchased the rights to. And this is another interesting thing about the movie business. They often buy the rights to a book before that book is even published, or in this case, even written. They just get an outline. And although I would buy this book before it was written, because I think it's going to do well as a movie. I'll tell you what it's about in just a moment. But I thought that was interesting for you to know how the publishing world works. Publishers have connections with development executives at production companies and studios, and they will send out, either just like the outline or a rough draft or the final draft of a book before it goes to the public and say, do you want to option this? And they do that because if someone purchases the rights, then they can help use that to sell the book and be like, it's already been sold, and they get the headlines and they're like, this book's a big deal, you better read it now. So this is going to be the upcoming book written by Scott Kelly, the astronaut who just finished a year in space, and it's going to be called, what do you know, Endurance, My Year in Space. But this guy is really interesting. He has a twin brother who's also an astronaut, Mark Kelly, and if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he's the astronaut married to Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who of course was shot point blank in the head and survived, and came back and actually recently spoke at the Democratic Convention. So really interesting family here. So what they're going to do is they're going to tell the story of Scott Kelly and how he went from being a C student to a Navy test pilot to how he and his brother overcame incredible obstacles and odds to become astronaut brothers. And so then it's going to also, I'm sure, talk about Gabby Giffords because she is a consultant on the film. And both Mark and Scott Kelly, well, I should say Scott first since it's his story, Scott and Mark Kelly will be executive producers on the film, and Amy Pascal will produce. That sounds pretty awe-inspiring. I think it's an excellent story and an interesting family, and I think it would be nice to show, we talk so much about, different groups overcoming incredible odds to accomplish wonderful things, and I think it's important, some people might be like, oh, so a white guy accomplished some stuff, but it's important to keep showing that everybody can accomplish something if they set their mind to it, even white guys. So I think it's excellent. I think this is a really good idea, just like how well Sully just did. Maybe that's one of the reasons this deal, actually come to think of it, just closed. They were like, look at that Sully box office. Let's get some of that for us. So interesting, very typical Hollywood story, and it's, I think, a good one. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. And speaking of typical Hollywood behavior, the transitions just make themselves. Let's go to the audience question, which was asked by quite a number of you yesterday on Movie Math, saying, why do you keep profiling the audience, Grace? Why do you even care? Well, the question was, how and why do you know or care about who goes to see a movie? Why do you care about the age? Why do you care about if it's a man or a woman? Why do you care about the ethnicity? Again, saying it's profiling, that very negative term. It's not. It's market research. And every single company, even YouTube, lets me know who's watching, the age group, and they don't do ethnicity, but they do the age group, they do the demographic, although you obviously can write anything when you sign up for a YouTube account, so they do the best they can, but they do age, gender, and they also tell me what country you come from. So I can see that information, through analytics. Any YouTuber can. And any company, anything that you interact with, any corporation does, consumer research. They really want to know who's buying their product and who isn't. And a movie, of course, is no different. Now, the reason they make it public is because they want to really show where they're performing, right? Like for them, it's important to, here's why. Okay, so let me first do the how. So what they do is when they get the cinema score, they also ask you to fill out, and also if you do like a test audience, sometimes you'll go to a movie and they'll give you like, we'd like to hear your opinion. And they give you that little yellow sheet with a pencil taped to it. And they ask you to fill out the questions about your ethnicity and your age, etc. And that's how they get this information. It's like when they poll for who's going to be elected for president. It's like 1,000 people or something. They don't ask everyone. They do spot polling across the country. And that gives them a snapshot of who's seeing the movie. And for instance, look at When the Bow Breaks. There was 71% black audience for a film that starred, a black cast. And I think Hollywood wants to know who's interested in this movie. And they do this for every film so patterns can emerge. So they want to see who's seeing a certain genre, who's seeing a certain type of movie, who actors bring out, who directors bring out. They want to know, so when they make a movie that's very similar, many of you, and we talked about this, that When the Bow Breaks is a natural follow-up to No Good Deed and The Perfect Guy. And so when they do the polling for those two movies, they have an idea of who's interested, and then they cannot waste their money on advertising. They go, well, look, it's going to be a predominantly black audience. Let's target that group in ads. Same for something like Sully. They go, okay, Clint Eastwood audiences skew older, so we're going to really target older, let's say older white audiences, right? So that's how they do that. Because you have to realize that people don't watch the same shows, they don't read the same things, they don't go to the same websites, they don't live in the same places, they don't eat at the same restaurants. There's patterns that emerge, right? You'll notice it. I mean, when you just it's something that's just a reality of life. So they don't want to waste money when they're doing ad buys, so they do targeted ad buys, and that's one of the reasons that studios want to know who's seeing their movie. Now, also they want to know who's seeing what an audience an actor brings out. So when the studio in the future decides to maybe make a Tom Hanks deal, they can look at his previous movies and say, okay, well, who does Tom Hanks appeal to? Let's put him in a movie where that audience would be appealed, that story would appeal to them. That's what made him such a great fit with Sully. And you can see the results. It was the right actor in the right role. And how do you determine what the right role is? You do your market research. Also, they want to know for product placement when they make these deals. When you see a product advertised in a movie, for instance, in Sully, they just advertise the heck out of the Marriott hotel chain. So they can go to Marriott when they're trying to make that deal and they say, well, this is who sees a Tom Hanks movie. And they say, these are the demographics. This is who sees a Clint Eastwood movie. This is, we've done some polling who's interested in, let's say, the Sully story, or these are similar films and this is who went to see it. And the Marriott looks at those numbers and they look at their own numbers. So they're like, well, who stays at Marriott hotels? Who's the typical Marriott customer? And obviously it lined up and they said, okay, let's make an investment in Sully. They will spotlight the Marriott hotel chain. They showed the Marriott hotel chain, I think, like 3 times. They made a really big deal of like, we're at the Marriott, we're at the airport Marriott, we're at the city Marriott, the New York City Marriott. And so Marriott says, we got our money's worth because we reached the audience that's most likely to stay at a Marriott hotel. So all of these things are important. And I wouldn't call it profiling. I think some of you took a negative thing away from it. It's not. It's just business. Every place I'm telling you, every place you eat, every time you click on something, they, however they can get that information, they are getting it as best they can. They really want to know, like, for instance, when you eat at a restaurant, they want to know who eats at our restaurants. For instance, just so you know, like, this isn't done in terms of like, anything about the consumer, but for instance, there's a really interesting article that in New Jersey, McDonald's is testing out a new restaurant where there's no seating. There's just 2 drive-in windows and a walk-up window, because they said, what? We've discovered that for most of our standalone restaurants, 70% of our business is drive-up business. So why spend the money for the real estate to have seating when we can have a leaner, meaner restaurant with more profit if we just focus on the walk-up sales and the drive-through sales? And it's all business. And Hollywood's just trying to do the same thing. So that's how it works. And how many of you ever been polled for who you plan to vote for president? Yet somehow these polls still come out. So that's how it works. These are companies. It's their whole thing to figure out who's seeing the movie, and it must work because Hollywood continues to do it and is obviously getting results for their money, because that stuff ain't free. If they want to know who's seeing their movies, they have to pay for that stuff to be done. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on today's top 3 stories and that multiple viewer question. Many of you wanted to know it. And also let me know what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.